welcome everyone, and thank you to everyone today for being on this webinar call, as well as for those of you who will be listening to this via recording. We just really want to thank you for being on the Grassroots advocacy team and your energy and dedication to not only marriage and family therapists, but the mental health profession. I'm Kathy Atkins. I'm the Deputy Executive Director, and I'll be co-hosting today with our federal lobbyist, David Connolly. Do you want to introduce yourself, David?
Hi, I'm David Connolly, and I'm happy to be with you. And for those Californians, let me just tell you, it is cold and windy here in the nation's capital.
Thank you, David. And so today, basically what we're going to be doing is an initial review of, what to expect, what's coming your way, some of the substance, the logistics, kind of getting your toes wet with what's coming. Also, just to help you get through, for many of you, this is your first time, and we want to make sure that any anxieties are relieved and things of that nature. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so this is, like I said, Lobbying 101. So today what we're going to talk about over the next hours, first we're going to go through the introduction to advocacy. What does the legislative process looks like? What is lobbying? We'll talk about our issues we're advocating. What does, the actual lobby days, what do they look like? What should you be expecting? Logistics, homework, what are we going to be asking of you before we actually go out to Washington? And then also the follow-up, what are we asking of you when you get back? Okay, so let's get started. All right, David, I think you have a little bit of background noise, just so you know. So David, we have here the bill process. It's complicated to say the least, so I thought you could take the lead here on sort of how legislation works in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. One of the things that I've learned in my relationship with CAMFT is that the rules that apply to the California legislature are different than the rules that apply to the U.S. Congress. So if you have had some experience with the California legislature, I just want to warn you that the rules are slightly different. But how it works in Washington is that an individual member, and what we usually do is we distinguish between senators and members of the House of Representatives by calling senators, and members of the House of Representatives, members. So what happens is either a senator or a member can draft a bill and they introduce it into their respective bodies. Depending upon the subject matter of that bill, it gets referred to one or more of the relevant committees of jurisdiction for that subject matter. For instance, Medicare. In the House, there are two committees that have jurisdiction over Medicare, the Ways and Means Committee and the Energy and Commerce Committee. So when a bill that is has a relationship with Medicare is introduced into the House, it gets referred to those two committees for consideration. In the Senate, on the other hand, there is only one committee of jurisdiction, and that's the Finance Committee. Now, once these bills have been referred to the committees examine them, and a decision is made as to whether or not they will take them up. They could possibly have a hearing on the committee, but more importantly, if they do take it up, they will set aside time to review the bill line by line, and I do mean that. They go through it line by line and give a chance for the members of the committee to offer amendments if they would like. At the end of this review process, they then take a vote of the full committee. And if a majority of the committee members are in favor of the bill, then they report it, and that's a term of art, report it to the full chamber for its consideration. The leadership of the chambers On the House, that would be the Speaker of the House. On the Senate, it would be the Majority Leader. They then decide whether or not they're going to bring the bill to the floor for consideration. If they do decide, then the bill gets scheduled on the calendar and it is brought to a debate and then a vote on the floor to see if it will pass. A simple majority will pass the bill, and if there are differences between the bill that was considered in the House and the bill that was considered in the Senate, then there will be a committee appointed of both senators and members to iron out the differences and come up with one similar bill. Once that similar bill is agreed upon, it goes back to the respective chambers for an up or down vote. If it passes both chambers by a simple majority, then it gets sent down to the president for his approval. If he approves it, he will sign it and it becomes law. If he does not approve it, he can veto the bill, and then the Congress has an opportunity to overturn the veto with a 2/3 vote. And that's the process.
Thank you, David. Before we move on, I just wanted to ask, it sounds like someone called in rather than through the webinar, and that there's a lot of background noise. So if you called in, can you please push mute on your phone? We're recording this and it's pretty hard to hear, so that would be super helpful if you wouldn't mind pushing mute. What I kind of wanted to add to what David said was, and sort of reinforce how different state and federal lobbying and bill process is. If you're used to California law and California legislation, there's what's called the standalone bills. You come up with a great idea, you bring it to your legislator, and it goes through the process in a fairly simple way. Whereas, as David mentioned, in the federal, you have your great idea, but the great idea has to be attached to this giant package that, even though your bill might be simple and fairly non-controversial, if you're attached to a giant bill that is controversial, that giant vehicle could really cause havoc with your teeny tiny bill that's important, but it's just a different process that makes getting legislation passed 100 times, harder. Did you want to add anything to that, David?
Only in that, and a good example of that is our success last year on the veterans side of the House, when we were able to get statutory language included in the Department of Veterans Affairs appropriations bill, a bill that was hundreds of pages long. And as Kathy said, our provision was just a few lines. So that's an example of how a particular piece of legislation can get folded into a larger bill. Just to give you a reference point, in each session of Congress, thousands, and let me emphasize that again, thousands of bills are introduced by senators and members of Congress.
Great, thank you, David. So moving on, David, I was hoping you could talk about sort of lobbying and advocacy generally, what it is, how's it done, things of that nature.
Yes, I think the phrase on the screen, for those of you who have the screen, for those who don't, it says, what is it? Attempting to influence decisions made by elected officials. I think that's an excellent definition. The question then is, how do you try to influence your elected officials? And this is a process which has at its absolute core is education. You want to educate the legislator and his or her staff as to the nature of the issue that you're advocating. And let's use Medicare as an example. I'm a firm believer that when you try to transact business in the nation's capital with the Congress, that you should try to meet with the congressional staff. because the member and the senator's time is so restricted when they're here in Washington. It oftentimes is difficult to get their attention for an extended period of time by which you need to educate them on the issue. Therefore, I feel it's much more effective to meet with their staff person who has subject matter knowledge of Medicare, for instance, and then you tell them as to what you want, why you want it, and how it affects their particular district or state. And again, the key is education of what's happening back home. One of the reasons we love for you folks to come out is because you are a constituent. You not only yourself vote in elections, and after all, let's not forget that the first job of a legislator is to get elected. They can't pass bills, they can't block bills if they're not in fact elected. So you have to be elected first. That's where you come in. You're a constituent. And not only do you have your vote, you have the vote of your family, you have the vote of your friends, you have the vote of the people that you work with. So in other words, you could be working on a particular issue, could interact with a member of Congress or the senator, and you could be very pleased with what happened. And you would tell your family and friends and coworkers about that experience. Or you could be very unhappy about what happened, and you could likewise relate that experience. That translates into votes. Your vote all of a sudden maybe become 10 votes or 20 votes because they, in fact, maybe will relate your experience to their friends and families. And believe me, legislators and their staffs are very aware of this dynamic. Finally, we represent nonprofits. And for the most part, the real general rule in Washington is that the nonprofits are the white hat people. They're the folks who are involved in a charitable or a very worthwhile endeavor and are hoping to improve the condition of other citizens. So it's a little bit easier from the lobbying standpoint if you represent a nonprofit, because the staff and the legislators are aware of the type of work these type of organizations do. Finally, there is so much material. I mentioned the thousands of bills that are introduced in Congress. I should have added that only a very few of them are considered, of course, but there is so much material that a legislator has to deal with in his or her normal day. They deal with foreign affairs. They deal with domestic policy, such as water in the Imperial Valley. They deal with intelligence issues. They deal with health issues. The breadth of complexity of these type of issues is very broad. So they can't be experts in everything. And that's where we turn to you, the experts in marriage and family therapy, to educate the legislators and their staff.
Thank you, David. Something I wanted to, I was thinking about as you were talking about all this, something I wanted to add is, you know, there's a term of art, special interest groups, and you hear about it on the news or in the media, and it's almost used like a dirty word. And frankly, that is what CAMFT is. It's a special interest group, and the implication is that that somehow they are trying to do something underhanded to influence the government, when in fact it's really what David's talking about. What the special interest groups do is they educate on issues. Now, there might be special interest groups that are the antithesis of us or the antithesis of a value or platform you hold true, but that is what special interest groups do. They educate on their issues, why the issue is important, why certain bills affect these issues, And I just think it's important if when you're speaking and you hear that special interest group, it's not a bad word. It's people who are educating on issues. David, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think that's a very good point, and I think unfortunately that particular phrase has been demonized, and it's been demonized by groups like the National Rifle Association or a tobacco group, or I guess even organized pharmaceutical companies. There is sometimes its use is got a negative context, but Kathy is absolutely correct. Special interests are not a dirty word. And I think to take it a step further, as you were speaking about it, Kathy, I can't think of another special interest group that would be opposed to the particular issues that we advocate on. As I say to congressional staff all the time, you're not going to have a group coming up opposing or disagreeing with what we're saying.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so sort of moving on to an overview of the CAMFT issues we will be advocating. Now, I add 3 here, but I want to be clear that the chances are we're only going to be advocating on the first bullet point, Medicare. That is our #1 reason for going. That is our #1 goal in Washington. But I wanted to quickly review some of the issues going on with the Affordable Care Act, as well as LMFTs in the VA, on the off chance that we do cover them while we're in DC. Now, I wanted to highlight also that you are going to be having a lot more information come your way. Today is just, like I said, really to get your toes in the water and get a general overview. We are going to be sending you more materials than you know what to do with, to self-educate, research, know the ins and outs about not only the issues in the bill, but reminders of your education experience. Why are you qualified to do Medicare? So you're going to have a lot of information coming your way, and I just kind of want to reassure you on that fact. Okay, so Medicare, like I said, this is CAMFT's big federal issue, and sort of like David said, this is actually a simple issue. There's not a lot to it. We simply want to add LMFTs to be reimbursed as Medicare providers. Currently, MFTs cannot get reimbursement for patients under Medicare. So Medicare is covering people who are 65 and older, or certain kind of disability packages. What we often see now is an LMFT will have a good relationship with a patient, be doing great work, making a lot of success. They have their birthday, they turn 65, and oops, sorry, we can't see you anymore. Needless to say, that is very concerning for continuity of care and treatment goals. Some history on Medicare, we've been doing this for a decade. And on the, to the average observer, 10 years plus seems like a really long time. But on the federal level, unlike the state, it actually isn't that long. Ironically, psychologists took almost just as long. So this battle is not, while it seems alarming, it's not overly alarming to us. It's disappointing, but not alarming. This isn't a bad bill. As David pointed out, there's not opposition. It's all about timing. Like we mentioned, this is not, unlike state, this is not a standalone bill. Our little bill is going to be attached to a giant package. And if there's something people don't like in that giant package, well, your little bill goes down in flames with the big package. I think of an example. This was, someone out there might know the year, and I apologize, I can't remember. We had one bill that it passed through the House. It was great. It was about to pass through the Senate. Literally, we were days out of it passing through the Senate, and Ted Kennedy died. And literally, the Senate makeup changed, and because of his death, our whole bill got dropped, and it didn't get signed. I mean, we were already counting our chickens when that happened. So sometimes just strange things happen like that when you're tying yourself to a bigger bill. As we mentioned, there's no opposition. Really, the issues that the problems we face are 2. One is getting into a bigger bill, and 2, money. Now, I would, as you all will, argued that this actually does not cost money. But we want to educate you sort of on what the money issues are. David, you do a much better job of explaining the scoring if you want to go ahead and do that.
Okay. One of the rules of both the House and the Senate is that before a bill can come to the floor, it has to be, quote, scored, unquote, scored. And the entity that does the scoring is called the Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, and it is a nonpartisan arm of the Congress that evaluates a bill and tries to come up with the cost. They have certain rules by which they have to follow. And it is those rules, I think, it's been the largest obstacle for us in the past couple of years. Let me explain what I mean. When, as Kathy mentioned, when this bill passed the House back in 2009, it was scored at $100 million cost over 5 years. And what we could not do with that cost was we could not say, in terms of the CBO score, yes, it's going to cost $100 million, but it's going to save $200 million. So at the end of the day, you're actually going to gain $100 million. That's called dynamic scoring. But under the rules of the CBO, that is not allowed. So whenever we go into lobby, the legislators or the staff will always say, has the bill been scored? Yes. And what is that score? 100 million over 5. And under the rules of both chambers, though sometimes they are not honored in the breach, you have to come up with an offset. If you're going to spend $100 million, you've got to come up with a savings of $100 million, because the theory of the rule is that legislation has to be neutral. So that's what the problem is when we talk about scoring and we talk about CBO.
Thank you, David. So bringing us to the here and now, sort of what the bill path in Congress is. So right now it's a new legislature. So what we're doing right now is we're reaching out to get bipartisan support and a bipartisan bill in both houses. So the Senate bill is going to be an easier lift. We already have probable commitments from both a Republican and a Democrat on the Senate side. From the House side, the same sponsor as last year, Thompson from California, has committed, and what we're looking for right now is a Republican on the House side. So that's kind of where we are now. So the goal is by the time we end up in DC, we can say, you know, this is HR 123 and Senate Bill ABC. Normally when we end up in Washington, we have our bills. There's a little concern I have about, given the impact and effect the ACA has sort of on Congress right now, is that we may not actually have a bill at that point. Again, not because there's any problem with our bill, but you know, if any of you are watching the news, the ACA has really taken over what they're working on. And so things are moving at a glacial pace so that they can make the ACA a priority. So it's not a big concern, but I throw it out there, just that the ACA and the work that's being done on it, you know, may have an impact on our bill. So what's the goal? The goal is, if we don't have a Republican House sponsor, would be to find one while we're out there. The second goal is to get as many co-sponsors as possible on these bills, both in the Senate and the House. And what we'll be targeting while we're there is the House. What we're looking for is Republicans, especially ones that are on the Committee of Jurisdiction. Now, this is two reasons why. One, they're the majority right now, and also they tend to be the group that is very hesitant about passing laws that, quote unquote, you know, cost money. So to get Republicans on this bill, more Republicans than Democrats, would be something that we're really trying to achieve. We also would be going after Republican caucus members. David, is there anything you want to add?
No, that covers it. Yes.
Okay.
I guess, well, Kathy, just one thing, just by way of explanation. In the House in particular, you really have to have a member of the majority party, which is now the Republicans, as your lead sponsor, or else the bill will not be considered at all, for the most part. Secondly, our sponsor from the last two Congresses, Chris Gibson, has retired, and that's the reason why we're looking for a replacement. If Chris had not retired, he would have reintroduced the bill, and we would not be searching for a replacement.
Thank you. Okay, so the Affordable Care Act, and some people call it Obamacare. Again, I'm going to give a pretty quick overview of this, just given it's unlikely we will be lobbying on this in Washington, but I did want to touch on it briefly. I'll tell you, this is not only is the Affordable Care Act complicated, the repeal is very complicated. Regardless of your opinion of the Affordable Care Act, it's important to CAMFT that we ensure that Californians have access to and coverage of mental health and behavioral health services. So where are we now with the repeal? In January, a budget resolution went through that directed Senate and House committees to put together a package to repeal the ACA, likely including replacement language. Right now, the drafts, they're coming up with the drafts. Again, if you're watching the news, I'm sure you hear a lot about what's going on with that. You know, you hear about every other House member has their own version, and you know, it's inundating the news right now. So arguably, once the drafts are prepared, it goes to the full House and Senate, they merge it, and off it goes to President Trump. As easy as that might sound, it is incredibly complicated, and I think this will be a lengthy process. Now, why do we care about this issue? Couple reasons. Number one, whatever replacement comes to the repeal, we want to make sure behavioral health and mental health services are covered. Second, the Medi-Cal expansion, the Medicaid, so Medicaid is what is in each state. Medi-Cal, California decided to call Medicaid Medi-Cal. So just so you know, if you hear those, they're the same thing. So the Medi-Cal expansion here, we know it brought on 5 million extra people, and of that, 30% had mental health issues compared to 20% of the general population. So the people covered by the Medi-Cal expansion have a higher rate of mental health issues. And so if you were to pull that, you're targeting a higher rate of people who have mental health needs and need health care. Third, parity enforcements. I'm not particularly concerned about this, but I do belong, CAMFT belongs to a couple advocacy groups for mental health, sort of protection of mental health in the replacement package. And there is talk that there's concerns that if the repeal happened without an appropriate mental health replacement, that parity could be affected. They said, I'm not super concerned about that, but it's something we care about, we want to keep an eye on. So what are next steps? We're awaiting these drafts, obviously, because we need to analyze them and comment on them. We might love them, we might hate them. We'll have to see how the mental health community reacts. Again, if you're watching the news, there's a lot of infighting, a lot of advocacy. This is delaying everything. Just in the news right now, they're saying the House wants to take it up in the next week. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. So this is something that could be moving along nicely in 2 weeks, or this might be something that it's going to be 2018 after the election that is getting finalized. So, what's our goal on this issue? Our goal is that we want to advocate that there's no repeal without proper replacement, protecting access to and coverage of mental health and behavioral services. So we're not arguing whether the ACA was good, bad, or anything. It's whatever you do and replace it. This is what we want to have included. Again, we're probably not going to advocate on this, but I did want to touch on it. David, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you've covered it pretty well. I really do.
Okay. LMFTs in the VA. This one is highly unlikely that we will be touching on, but I did want to give you some background. Obviously, it's important that MFTs are able to work in the VA, not just for jobs, but as you all know, veterans are totally underserved. I mean, you can't open the newspaper without hearing that about these ridiculous wait times and the suicide rate. So clearly they need better health services. Just as a history, we've been advocating for this for a while. In 2006, law passed that allowed LMFTs to work, to be employed within the VA. That was great. It took 4 years for them to actually implement that law. We had to spend a lot of our time and resources trying to actually have them implement what the language was. So in 2010, the standards finally came out, but what they included in the standards was language that said the employee had to have graduated from a CAMFT approved program. Well, they did that without really consulting with any stakeholders. And what it did is disqualify between 50 and 90% of MFTs, depending on the state. California was especially hit hard. So there we go. We started lobbying again to have that language removed. It took 6 years. And in 2016, the Military and Construction Bill, which funds the VA, was signed by President then Obama. And essentially what it said was that you didn't have to come from a CAMFT approved program. You could come from a state that as long as you passed the highest licensing exam and you were licensed in that state. So here we are now, it just passed. We're back, kind of circling back that we need to have this implemented. At this point, and I tend to be a little bit more of a Debbie Downer than David is, he's more of an optimist. They seem to be dragging their feet again. And we're hopeful, David's hopeful that they continue to push forward and implement this in a quick and fair manner. I'm a little more concerned, you know, we go back and forth about this, but ultimately if they do drag their feet, we will go back to the congressional VA committees and say, hey, you know, you all decided this is important because we need to get vets, or not vets, we need to get people their services they need at the VA, and can you push them along? So what's our goal? If we lobby this, again, which is unlikely, is to put pressure, to ask the congressional members to put pressure on the VA to implement, implement in an expedited way this law. David, do you have anything to add?
No, other than that, one of the advantages that California has is that we do have a couple of key members on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and the Veterans Affairs Committees in both the Senate and the House are very bipartisan. It's one of the rare instances these days where it's hard to tell who's the Democrat and who's the Republican. We have some good members from California on the House side, and there may be reason when you come to town that we may have to touch base with 1, 2, or 3 of those offices, but we're hopeful that we will not have to.
Now, before we move on to sort of the logistics and what the lobby day looks like, I wanted to open it up to the people on the phone for, you know, five minutes to see if there's any questions about the actual laws themselves. Like I said, you are going to be getting a lot of information on these, and you know, you're going to have tons of information on the substance, how MFTs can be helpful, the background of MFTs, what the law means. So trust me when I say you're going to get more information than you need. So I don't want to spend too much time going into the weeds about the laws themselves, but I wanted to see if there was any questions generally about these laws before we move on. So I'm going to unmute you all if you give me a second here. And if you could mute yourself, again, if you're on the phone, until a question, because we unfortunately pick up a lot of background noise. Are there any questions? Oh, well, this is great. Okay, then if there's no questions, we'll move forward. And again, if something comes up and after this webinar, you're thinking about it, you start thinking, oh, you know, I wish I had asked that, what have you, please feel free to email me and I'll make sure you get everything you need. So just one last time, making sure there's no questions. Okay, I'll move on. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so here is, we're going to talk about the actual lobby days themselves and what they look like. Again, I remind you all to mute yourselves, and I thank you for doing that. This technology is amazing, but it's not perfect. So David, do you want to take the lead here of sort of what the lobby days will look like?
Yes, I do. What we usually do and what we plan to do this year is we gather up in a meeting room in one of the House office buildings, and we spend the morning reviewing what the purposes of the visits are going to be, some techniques on how you should interact with the congressional staff. We have had in the past some congressional staff stop by and give you their viewpoint, and then open it up to any questions or concerns that you have before we start out. After lunch, there will be a series of appointments that we make for groups, and you will be assigned a particular group, and then that group will go and have a meeting. If the meeting is with your particular member, then we'll ask you to be the lead person and to explain not only the substance of the issue, Medicare, but I think more importantly, the practical effect of the issue that you experience back home. That's what leaves an impression on congressional staff. The practical problems that their constituents back home have to deal with. And one that stands out in my mind is in previous years where we had a CAMFT member who was, well, we actually had two CAMFT members. One worked for an insurance company and the other worked for the county. And their big problem, as Kathy mentioned before, was that when people aged out of coverage, in other words, when they turned 65 and they were no longer under their employer's health plan, they did not have the opportunity to continue with that particular therapist because Medicare did not cover the service. And they were able to relate to the staff how frustrating it was for them in their inability, let me emphasize that again, inability to find a mental health provider to care for the patients once they went on to Medicare. So that's going to be the focus of the actual lobbying. And then finally, almost as important as presenting the case, putting the local face on it, is what we call the ask, where you ask the staff person to intercede with the member for them to either sponsor or co-sponsor the bill. That's what we're going to be asking for in April, co-sponsors of our Medicare bill. We then gather back at the hotel after the day is complete, and we review what particular experiences members of the group have, and then how we kind of summarize those experiences with a view towards going forward in our activities once you get back home to California.
Great, thank you, David. Something I wanted to add or just really emphasize is that when you break up into groups, we're going to break you up into groups based on the meetings and who's going where and when. And you are going to have someone with you, either staff or the lobbyist, who will be able to direct you and sort of get things going or answer questions if you're stuck. I'll say for any of you, if this is your first time, the first meeting is the hardest. I see people, I've gone year after year, and I see people have a lot of anxiety, nervous energy leading up to the first meeting. And I will tell you, after that first meeting, it's they say, this is the easiest thing ever. I can't believe I was nervous about this. And not only do they think that, it's fun. It's a fun thing. Not only is it educational, you feel like you're making a difference, but it's fun. You're running around the halls, you know, you're bumping into senators. I mean, it's a really neat experience. As far as your groups, I've noticed over the years that the group kind of gets into I don't know, like an organic groove. And it is quite funny. You'll see that you don't have to do this way, but it really does seem to organically happen that the one person who always seems to have the best start off speech. And then one person always has that great story they can relay. And then you have the closer who seems really confident and articulate. And it really does seem to happen this way. And you're going to get into a groove with your group. And I just want to reinforce what David said is that they, you know, especially at the federal level, they love their constituents. It's huge for them. So we're really thankful to all of you for agreeing to be a part of this. Okay, logistics. I wanted to cover sort of what this all looks like, not just the lobby days itself that David just discussed, but sort of some of the questions and answers about just, you know, how do I get there? So starting off with travel, we ask that you buy your plane tickets ASAP. I started looking at prices myself. The prices are astronomical compared to years prior. I'm not quite sure why. We will be sending you information about the various airports. What we ask is that you buy the most cost-efficient plane ticket that doesn't have you, schlepping all over the United States. So don't feel like you need to, fly to Michigan and back down to Texas and over to DC. So, get there efficiently, but just please get on buying those tickets. We will send you out reimbursement forms, and we'll send you information on sort of how to turn all that in, things of that nature. We'll provide information how you need to get from the airport. We're staying at the Hyatt Capitol Hill. Again, keep receipts because we're going to reimburse for everything. What we're asking is that you try to be there for dinner at 6 p.m. on Sunday. It's not the end of the world if you don't get there because we're not necessarily talking business Sunday night, but it's a great way to get to know the people you're going to be lobbying with. Get on your East Coast as soon as possible. It's a really nice time to settle your nerves and get to know everybody. What we're also asking is that you don't leave Tuesday night before 7 p.m. or a flight could be at 7 p.m., but that's the earliest we would ask. That's almost impossible to get, so most people obviously leave Wednesday morning. So that's travel. Food, like I said, Sunday night we'll have a group dinner. The breakfast, you're on your own. So you can have breakfast at the hotel, you can go down the street to some restaurant, what have you. We're gonna have a schedule, so we want you to keep the schedule, but the breakfast is on your own. You can either put it on your room or keep receipts. Lunch will be with the lobbying groups. You'll have dinner Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday if you're still there with the group. And I recommend when you're lobbying to maybe bring like a little snack or something along those lines, just to keep you going. They're long, hard days, I'll be frank. Your attire, business casual or suit, no jeans, please. Wear comfy walking shoes. You're not going to be doing so much, well, you will be doing a lot of walking. More than that, you'll be shocked at the amount of standing around time you do, because you will get to someone's office and they're running behind, and so you're just standing there. They don't have seats in the halls. So you're just standing there. You might be sitting there for 20 minutes. You meet with the legislator, but because they were behind, you're now running to the next one. So if you can run in stilettos and they're comfortable, wear them. But I do recommend comfortable shoes. Check the weather. DC in March, it can be hot or snowing. So be mindful of that. Layers, I recommend layers. please bring your business cards. We'll be asking you, they often ask for them, so have them available. I remind you, you're going to be going through security. So if you like to travel with things that routinely set off the security alarms, I would, unless it's something you can't remove from your body, I would recommend leaving those at the hotel room, given you're often going to be running to another meeting. And I will tell you now, the Capitol, I've been 10 years in a row and I still cannot figure out how to get around. It is very complicated, and the last thing you want to be doing is stuck in some security checkpoint. I recommend bringing a camera, or if you use your cell phone while we're around, because again, you're going to have times when you're running from meeting to meeting, but then you might have a 40-minute break. And what people will sometimes do is, quickly run over to the Supreme Court or something like that. And, you want to take a picture. I also want to comment on, I know lots of times people take advantage of this lobbying effort to make it into a trip, either themselves or they might bring family. And if you do, that's absolutely fine. If you're going to go early or stay late, let us know. We might be able to help keep that cost of the hotel at that group rate. Certainly can't guarantee it. A lot of hotels won't do it, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Obviously, you'd be paying for that extra time, but that is an option. If you have your significant other or whatever with you, they're welcome to come to dinner with us, but obviously they would not be part of the lobbying team. David, do you have anything to add?
Just a question, Kathy. You said March. Did you really mean
April? I meant April. I apologize. Sorry.
April is rainy. So if you have something that could protect you from the rain, you might want to consider sticking that in your purse or your bag, just in case.
Great, thank you. Okay. Okay, so things to do before the lobby trip. Like I mentioned numerous times, I want to reinforce that you're going to be getting a lot of information on Medicare, as well as the other issues that you can read, digest, get to understand the issues, get to understand our arguments of why MFTs are so terrific and why you're so capable. Like I said, you're going to be an expert on all this information by the time we get there. In addition to reading the materials, please feel free to ask me questions. There is no such thing as a dumb question. I would much rather get your questions answered than you have angst or any concerns about it. We ask you to talk to your colleagues. Depending on the population you work with, Medicare might not be an issue that you deal with. Talk to your colleagues and get stories from them about Medicare. People in your area that can't get access because of this issue. And you can borrow their story. Nobody will ever know it's a borrowed story. We'll send you, along with the materials, who you'll be meeting with and information on them. We recommend, you take a look at their website, get to know who they are. You might have graduated from the same college. You both might be fishermen, what have you. It's information that's helpful to know for conversational pieces. I also recommend that you sign up if they have e-alerts, anything like that, or a Facebook page or Twitter. That's a good way to know what are they working on, their interests, what's the issue that they're working on. Again, you're not going to go in to talk about, some other bill that has nothing to do with ours, but it's just good for you to have background information. David, anything to add?
I just have a final word. Are we at the final word?
Nope.
No, I have nothing to add on that.
Okay. Okay, so follow-up, sort of short term, we want you to write thank you cards to the people you meet, and we'll work that out while we're there, sort of who's going to write what cards and why, and we'll help you craft your thank yous. Also, we want to make sure questions are answered. Often you'll be in a meeting, they'll ask some question that no one in the meeting knows. How many MFTs are in your your area, what what age population, you know, things that you may not have in your at your fingertips. Actually, we would have the number of MFTs, but other questions that, like I said, how many hospitals or things that we just may not know on the fly. We want to get back to them, and depending on what the issue is, it might be David getting back to them, it might be you. So, you know, we do need to get back those questions. Before I move on to, I wanted to ask, when you're in the meetings, to please grab the card of the person you meet with. You'll want it long-term. So now long-term follow-up is, and we'll discuss this in a lot more detail down the road, but, you know, we're looking to the team to really do long-term grassroots. Things like setting up meetings in the local office. So obviously we're not expecting you to fly back to DC all the time, but each one of your legislators has one, if not more, local offices. Following up, showing up again. Hey, how's it going? You know, you said you were interested. You know, what can I do to convince you to sign on to Medicare? Maybe connect the local chapter with them. Maybe some other issue comes up. Maybe we don't cover MFTs in the VA while we're in DC, but something comes up and we really need some follow-up. Maybe something along those lines. Again, we'll provide materials down the road. You know, how do you set up a meeting? What do you say? Things like that. But I wanted to, you know, just throw it out there that will be happening. So now I'm going to open it up again to any additional questions you may have. Don't feel like you need to ask a question, or if you have a question that you just kind of want to ask me personally, again, just email me. That's fine. I want to make sure every single question is answered so that you're as comfortable as possible. Did anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Sure. You said to sign up for e-alerts, Facebook, Twitter. Is that for your congressional leader?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So I do Facebook, but I don't do Twitter. So
it doesn't. No, I just mean these are all suggestions. I don't do Twitter. You know, just ways to get to know them. It's whatever works for you.
Great.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just about the business cards. You said bringing business cards. I work for a couple of different organizations, and I have a private practice. Do they just want your individual personal card?
It's whatever you want to give. Whatever you think is, whatever you think is most appropriate.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I have two questions. The first one is, can we share this information on our Facebook? Because I'm thinking of, like, you know, I have a lot of my friends are MFTs or LMFTs. Can I share this information with them to kind of gather information and kind of maybe
you can share anything you want. You might want to email me offline so I can help you craft what to say. You don't have to, but if you want to, I'm willing to help you do that. But absolutely, you know, do it. You know, do skywriting to get the information. It's anything's fine.
Yeah, because I'm trying to, like, maybe like if like a group can be created on the side that, you know, can get more people to kind of advocate or kind of share their stories, and then that can also like lead to maybe like even create like a bigger impact, because there's like a lot of stories, not just like us. And the last question I had was, how many people are per? So I'm in the Norwalk district, and our teacher. How many people are per district that's been targeted?
I apologize. I don't understand your question.
Okay, so for each targeted congressional district, how many people were chosen per group? And if we can like connect with that person, so
it's you. At this point, it's you.
Okay.
Yeah. Down the road, it'll change, but we can't fly 400 members to DC. So, yeah. Any other questions?
I sent in a question via text, hoping that would get caught, but it didn't. I was just curious, will the CAMFT representatives coming in to do the lobbying have CAMFT cards at some point, as well as their own business cards? Or will we be would they be going in to the legislators just with their own personal cards?
If I understand your question correctly, I'll have my card, David will have his card, and you'll have your card, and we'll be sharing all those cards.
Okay, so there'll be clusters of people with CAMFT representatives along?
Each group is going to have either a lobbyist and or a staff member with them.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we're not sending you out on your own. So there'll be someone there to hold your hand, and trust me, after the first meeting, you're going to say, okay, you can go. We don't need you anymore. Any other questions?
There's another one that Heather Jans put through. I don't know if there was a reason why she texted it rather than talking. Did you get that one?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, I'm going to read it. I wanted to know if we can get an itinerary for DC with the arrival times and departures expected to make sure that we allow those expectations, or we follow those expectations when booking.
Yep. So like I said, what we're hoping is that you can get there for the dinner on Sunday at 6 p.m. and that we ask that you don't leave before 7 p.m. on Tuesday. But you'll be getting all the information you need, again, about the airports and how to get from airports, the time frames. Like I said, you're going to get more information than you want. But if you feel like after you get the information it's still not enough, we will be happy to provide you as much information as you want to make you educated on the issues, but also the logistics. My experience over the years is that people's angst lies more with the logistics than the actual substance. Because you know it, your MFTs, you deal with this, you read articles, but we will make sure you have the information you need. And again, when you get off this 2 hours from now and have questions, please feel free to call me. I am more than happy to get the answers met.
I have a question.
Sure.
You're talking all about the DC trip and not much mention of the Sacramento trip. Is there going to be another meeting about the Sacramento trip and when to be there?
Yeah, that was discussed at 10 a.m., but we recorded it, and I will send you the link as soon as I get it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Were we supposed to be a part of that meeting?
No.
Okay.
Oh, good. Okay.
Hi, Kathy. I just wanted to make sure that if we wanted access to this Zoom meeting, that we'd be able to obtain a link to that.
Yep. Once I get it, it takes a while, and the person who gives it to me is actually on a work trip, and so it's going to take a few days, but I'll get it out. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Just one last thing. Can we, like the team that's part of this trip, can we all be connected somehow so we can?
Yep, we're going to create a group email. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Okay, great. Well, again, I'm going to say it again. You're going to get tons of information. Please email me with any questions. You can call me or email me. Email's better. And then we can set up a time if we need to talk. And I just really want to thank everybody for their time, their energy, their dedication. It's a very exciting experience, and we're so thankful to all of you. David, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I have one final thing. And if there's anything that you take from today's presentation or our prep in the morning of the first lobby day, it's this. You all are taxpayers. It is your money that funds the particular congressional office that you're going to visit. So in other words, you're going to your own office. It just happens to be in the nation's capital. So when you think about that you're going to your office to talk about a particular subject matter, Medicare, that should take some of the nervousness from you, because it's your office just as much as the member of Congress, the staff. You're the citizen, you're the taxpayer, and you're exercising your rights to deliver a message to them.
Thank you, David. So again, thank you, everybody. I'm sure you'll have questions. Feel free to contact us, and we'll get everything you want answered. So thank you, and have a great day.